Broke single dad counts change for medicine when the billionaire nearby whispers, "I'll cover it all." No one knew that one tiny act of kindness would explode into a life-shattering secret neither man could hide. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the small-town pharmacy as Jason Miller held his daughter's tiny hand. His work boots scuffed against the worn linoleum floor as they made their way to the prescription counter. The day had been long, 10 hours of construction work in the hot sun. But Lily needed her medicine. "Daddy, look!" Lily tugged at his sleeve, pointing to a display of colorful stuffed animals near the counter. Her eyes lit up at a fluffy purple unicorn. Jason's heart squeezed. "Maybe another time, sweetie." He forced a smile, knowing there wouldn't be enough money even for the medicine, let alone toys. The pharmacist, Mrs. Thompson, greeted them with familiar kindness. "Hello, Lily. How are you feeling today?" "Better." Lily bounced on her toes, her brown pigtails swaying. "I drew a picture at school of a rainbow." "That's wonderful, dear." Mrs. Thompson's smile turned sympathetic as she looked at Jason. "Here, for the refill?" Jason nodded, already digging into his pocket. His calloused fingers brushed against the collection of coins he'd been saving. He'd been picking up extra shifts, but between rent, groceries, and utilities, there was never enough. "That'll be $68.43, Mrs. Thompson said softly, trying to keep her voice down. Jason's stomach dropped. He'd only managed to save $52 and change. Spreading the coins on the counter, he began counting them out loud, his voice barely a whisper. 10, 20, 30. Behind him, someone sighed heavily. Another person shuffled their feet. "Come on, some of us have places to be," a man grumbled from the back of the line. Lily pressed closer to Jason's side, her small hand gripping his worn jean pocket. He could feel her tension. She always knew when he was worried, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. "I'm sorry," Jason muttered, his face burning as he recounted the coins. "I thought I had more." His hands trembled slightly as he moved the stacks around, hoping somehow the math would change. Mrs. Thompson leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Jason, we might be able to work something out. How much more do you need?" The deep, gentle voice came from behind them. Jason turned to see a tall man in an expertly tailored charcoal suit. Despite his obvious wealth, there was nothing condescending in his expression, only genuine concern in his warm brown eyes. "Sir, I couldn't—" Jason started to protest, but the stranger was already reaching for his wallet. "I insist," the man said, placing his credit card on the counter. He knelt down to Lily's level, his kind smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Hi there. I'm Ethan. What's your name?" "Lily," she replied, showing none of her father's hesitation. "Do you like unicorns? I saw a purple one over there." Ethan chuckled. "Purple unicorns are the best kind." Jason's chest tightened with a mixture of gratitude and shame. "Please, you don't have to." "I want to," Ethan said firmly, standing back up. He turned to Mrs. Thompson. "Please add that purple unicorn to the total." Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Ethan confirmed, winking at her. Jason watched, overwhelmed, as Mrs. Thompson rang up both the medication and the stuffed animal. His daughter's face glowed with joy as she hugged the unicorn to her chest, while his own cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I'll pay you back," Jason insisted, even though he knew it would take weeks to save enough. "There's no need," Ethan said, signing the receipt. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a business card, offering it to Jason. "But if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to call." Jason stared at the card, embossed with the name Ethan Cole and a phone number. His fingers closed around it automatically, even as his pride screamed at him to refuse. A small hand tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Are you an angel?" Lily asked, her voice filled with innocent wonder. "Daddy says angels help people when they need it most." The line of customers behind them had grown quiet, the earlier impatience replaced by something softer. Jason saw Mrs. Thompson discreetly wipe at her eyes. "Just someone trying to do what's right," Ethan replied gently. He straightened his tie and gestured to the waiting line. "We should let these folks get their prescriptions too." Jason gathered the medication and his scattered coins, his movements clumsy with emotion. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice rough. "I don't know how to—" "Just take care of that little girl," Ethan said quietly, his eyes showing understanding of everything Jason couldn't put into words. He placed his credit card back in his wallet and glanced down at Lily, who was still beaming at her new toy. "It was very nice to meet you both." As Jason guided Lily toward the exit, he heard her whisper, "Daddy, I think he really is an angel." Looking down at the business card in his hand, Jason wondered if perhaps she was right. His thumb traced over the embossed letters, feeling the weight of kindness he hadn't expected and wasn't sure he deserved. But the way Ethan had helped, with such simple dignity, asking nothing in return, had somehow made it easier to accept. Lily hugged her unicorn tighter as they stepped out into the evening air. "Can we name her Hope?" she asked, her eyes shining with happiness. Jason squeezed her hand, his heart full of gratitude for the stranger who had turned their difficult moment into something magical. "Hope is a perfect name, sweetheart. A perfect name." Just then, Jason heard footsteps behind them, and a familiar voice said softly, "I'll cover it all." Jason stared at the elegant black credit card on the counter, his face burning. "Sir, I can't accept this. It's too much." The well-dressed stranger's kind eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Please, I insist." His voice was gentle but firm, carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being listened to. "I'm Ethan Cole." Before Jason could protest further, Ethan turned to Mrs. Thompson. "Please, process the full prescription." He spoke with such natural grace that even the impatient customers behind them seemed to relax. Jason shuffled his feet, still clutching his pile of coins. The leather of Ethan's expensive shoes gleamed under the harsh pharmacy lights, making Jason's scuffed work boots seem even more worn by comparison. His calloused hands felt rough and out of place next to Ethan's manicured appearance. Lily tugged at Jason's sleeve. "Daddy, my chest feels tight." Her small voice wavered. Ethan immediately crouched down to Lily's level, his expensive suit wrinkling as he balanced on his heels. His face softened with genuine concern. "Hey there, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Lily," she answered, studying him with curious eyes. "Well, Lily, you're going to feel much better very soon." Ethan's smile was warm and reassuring. "This medicine is going to help you breathe easier, okay?" Lily nodded, her whole face lighting up at his kindness. She stepped closer to Jason, wrapping her small arms around his leg, while still watching Ethan with wonder. Mrs. Thompson finished processing the transaction, printing out the receipt with a gentle whir of the machine. "Here you go, Mr. Cole." She handed over the medicine bag with a smile that seemed both surprised and pleased. "Thank you," Ethan said, taking the bag and immediately passing it to Jason. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange, and Jason felt the smooth paper of a business card being pressed into his palm along with the bag. Lily tugged at Jason's shirt again, standing on her tiptoes to whisper in his ear, "Daddy, I think he's an angel." Her voice carried in the quiet pharmacy, making Jason's cheeks flush an even deeper shade of red. Several of the waiting customers murmured and smiled at Lily's innocent observation. Jason wanted to sink into the floor, the weight of their attention and pity pressing down on his shoulders. He was grateful for the help. How could he not be? But the shame of needing it burned in his chest. Ethan straightened up, smoothing his suit jacket with practiced ease. "The card has my direct number," he said quietly, meant for Jason's ears alone. "If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to call." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. Jason stood frozen, watching Ethan's retreating back until he disappeared through the automatic doors. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in his palm. He glanced down at it, thick, cream-colored cardstock with elegant black lettering that simply read, "Ethan Cole," followed by a phone number. Lily hummed happily beside him, swinging their joined hands as if nothing extraordinary had happened. To her, it was simple. Someone kind had helped them when they needed it. But Jason's pride twisted uncomfortably in his stomach as he slipped the card into his pocket. Never, he thought firmly. He would never call that number, never put himself in a position to need that kind of help again. He'd figure something out on his own, like he always had since Sarah died. "Come on, sweetie," he said, guiding Lily toward the exit. "Let's get you home and take your medicine." Lily skipped alongside him, her brown curls bouncing as she hummed a tune from her favorite cartoon. The medicine bag crinkled in Jason's grip while the business card sat heavy in his pocket, a reminder of both salvation and shame. The morning sun cast long shadows across the elementary school playground, as Jason walked Lily to her first-grade classroom. His work uniform was already on, a gray jumpsuit with maintenance stitched above the pocket, ready for his shift right after drop-off. "And then the nice man helped us get my medicine," Lily chatted excitedly to her teacher, Miss Roberts, who stood at the classroom door greeting students. "He was like an angel, just like in the stories you read us." Miss Roberts smiled warmly. "That sounds wonderful, Lily. Did you want to share something with the class today?" Lily nodded eagerly, pulling a folded paper from her pink backpack. She carefully smoothed it out, revealing a crayon drawing typical of a 7-year-old's artistic style. 3 figures stood hand in hand under a bright yellow sun. A tall stick figure in brown, Jason. A smaller figure with curly hair in the middle, Lily. And another tall figure in what appeared to be a black suit, Ethan. "See? This is my daddy," Lily pointed proudly. "And this is me. And this is my second daddy from the store." Her innocent declaration rang through the hallway, causing several nearby parents to turn their heads. Jason's face burned. "Lily, sweetheart, Mr. Cole isn't—" "What a lovely drawing," Miss Roberts interrupted smoothly, though Jason caught the curious glance she shot his way. "Why don't you put it up on our family wall, with the others?" Lily bounced over to the corkboard covered in children's artwork, while Jason stood rooted to the spot, acutely aware of the whispers already starting among the cluster of parents near the water fountain. "That's Jason Miller's daughter. Heard something happened at Thompson's pharmacy yesterday. Some rich man paid for their medicine. Second daddy? Have a good day, sweetheart," Jason called to Lily, who was already settling into her desk. He hurried out of the school, keeping his head down as more parents arrived with their children. The morning dragged by as Jason worked his usual shift at the community center. He scrubbed floors, replaced light bulbs, and unclogged toilets. Honest work that normally didn't bother him. But today, every person who passed seemed to be whispering about him. Mrs. Henderson from the library desk called out a too bright "good morning" before turning to whisper to her colleague. The regular basketball players, who usually just nodded at him now, openly stared. Even Mr. Peterson, who'd never said 2 words to Jason before, stopped to ask how he was holding up with an awkward pat on the shoulder. By afternoon, the gossip had apparently reached the diner where Jason stopped for his lunch break. The usual comfortable silence of his corner booth was broken by hushed conversations and not-so-subtle glances. "Single father, you know. That billionaire, Ethan Cole, probably looking for charity, taking advantage." Jason's sandwich turned to ash in his mouth. He left half of it uneaten, dropped his usual $1 tip on the table, and fled back to work. The walk home that evening felt endless. Main Street seemed to stretch for miles as he trudged past the shops closing for the day. Outside the grocery store, he overheard Mrs. Thompson, the pharmacist's wife, telling her friend, "You should have seen it, Martha. Poor man couldn't even afford his daughter's medicine." If Mr. Cole hadn't stepped in, Jason quickened his pace, his work boots heavy on the sidewalk. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, but he barely noticed, too focused on getting home to Lily, who was at their elderly neighbor Mrs. Garcia's apartment. After picking up Lily and listening to her excited chatter about school, they climbed the 3 flights to their small apartment. The building's elevator had been broken for months, and the stairwell smelled of cabbage and old cigarettes. "Can we have spaghetti tonight, Daddy?" Lily asked as Jason unlocked their door. Jason's heart sank as he remembered the nearly empty kitchen cabinets. "We'll have to see what we've got, sweetie. Maybe some soup instead?" He helped her with her backpack, hanging it on the wobbly coat rack by the door. "But we had soup yesterday," Lily said, though without complaint. She never complained about their meals, and that somehow made it worse. Jason slumped into one of their mismatched kitchen chairs, running a hand through his hair. The day's whispers echoed in his head as Lily settled at their small table with her homework. He was about to check their nearly bare cupboards when 3 solid knocks rang out from their front door. Frowning, Jason stood. They rarely got visitors, and Mrs. Garcia would have called out her name by now. He opened the door and froze. Ethan Cole stood in the hallway, his suit as impeccable as it had been at the pharmacy. But instead of a briefcase, he held 2 large paper bags full of groceries, the tops bursting with fresh vegetables and a loaf of French bread. "Good evening," Ethan said warmly, as if billionaires regularly showed up at worn-down apartment buildings with groceries. "I hope I'm not interrupting dinner?" Jason stood frozen in his doorway, staring at Ethan Cole's tall figure. The wealthy businessman held 2 large paper grocery bags in his arms, a gentle smile on his face. The hallway's fluorescent lights highlighted the stark difference between Ethan's crisp suit and the worn walls of Jason's apartment building. "Mr. Cole," Jason managed to say, his voice tight. "What are you doing here? Please, call me Ethan." He lifted the bag slightly. "May I come in?" Before Jason could respond, Lily's voice rang out from behind him. "Daddy?" "Who's at the door?" Jason hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly. "Come in," he said, his pride warring with basic courtesy. Ethan entered the small apartment, his presence somehow making the modest space feel even smaller. His eyes took in the neat but sparse furnishings, the threadbare couch, the small TV, the stack of medical bills partially hidden under a magazine on the coffee table. "Angel Man!" Lily exclaimed, recognizing him instantly. She bounced on her toes, her dark curls dancing around her face. "Daddy, look, it's the angel from the store." A slight blush colored Ethan's cheeks. "Just a regular person, sweetheart. I brought some groceries for you and your dad." "You didn't have to do that," Jason said sharply, crossing his arms. "We don't need—" "My drawings!" Lily interrupted, darting to her small desk in the corner. "I want to show you my drawings." Before either man could speak, she returned with a handful of papers, tugging on Ethan's sleeve. He set the grocery bags on the kitchen counter and crouched down to her level, giving her his full attention. "See?" Lily held up her crayon masterpiece. "This is you, and this is Daddy, and this is me in the middle." "That's beautiful work," Ethan said warmly. "You're quite the artist." Jason watched them, his jaw clenched. He walked to the kitchen and began unpacking the bags. Fresh fruits, vegetables, bread, milk, eggs, and other staples. His hands trembled slightly as he opened his nearly empty refrigerator. "Mr. Cole," "Ethan," he said, turning around. "I appreciate what you did at the pharmacy, but this," he gestured at the groceries. "This is too much. We're not a charity case." Lily looked up from her drawings, her smile fading at her father's tone. Ethan straightened up slowly. "That's not what this is about, Jason. I'm just trying to help a neighbor in need." "We're not neighbors," Jason shot back. "We're strangers. You don't know anything about us." "I know you're a dedicated father working hard to provide for your daughter," Ethan said calmly. "I know Lily has asthma that requires medication. And I know that sometimes life throws challenges at good people who deserve a helping hand." Jason's face flushed. "I can take care of my own daughter. I've been doing it for years." "Nobody's saying you can't," Ethan replied, his voice still gentle. "Accepting help doesn't make you weak, Jason. Sometimes it takes more strength to accept help than to refuse it." The words hit Jason like a physical blow. He turned away, busying himself with the groceries again, trying to hide the emotion on his face. Lily tugged on Ethan's sleeve again. "Do you want to see my other drawings? I made lots." "Lily." Jason started to protest, but Ethan was already following her to her little art corner. "I'd love to see them," Ethan said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside her small chair. She began showing him picture after picture, explaining each one with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. Jason watched them, his anger slowly deflating. There was something genuine about the way Ethan listened to Lily, asking questions about each drawing and laughing at her stories. He didn't act like a billionaire humoring a child. He seemed truly interested. The sun was setting outside when Lily suddenly announced, "You should stay for dinner." "Oh, no," Jason said quickly. "Mr. Cole probably has other plans." "I'd be honored," Ethan interrupted, "if it's not too much trouble." Jason looked helplessly at his kitchen. "We don't have much. We have mac and cheese," Lily declared proudly. "Daddy makes the best mac and cheese." Ethan smiled. "That sounds perfect." 20 minutes later, they sat around the small kitchen table, bowls of store-brand macaroni and cheese before them. Jason had managed to add some frozen peas to make it slightly more nutritious, feeling embarrassed about serving such a simple meal to someone who probably dined at 5-star restaurants. But Ethan ate with genuine appreciation, complimenting the meal and asking Lily about school between bites. She chatted happily about her teacher, her friends, and the class pet hamster named Squeakers. And then Sarah said Squeakers looked sad, but I told her hamsters can't look sad because they're always smiling. Lily giggled, and Ethan laughed with her. Jason watched them, something tight in his chest slowly loosening. The mac and cheese might have been cheap, but the laughter around his table was rich and genuine. For the first time in years, their small apartment felt a little less lonely. He caught Ethan's eye across the table, and the wealthy man gave him a small, understanding nod. In that moment, Jason realized that perhaps Ethan wasn't there out of pity or charity. Maybe he was there because he recognized something in them that called to him, something that had nothing to do with money at all. The dishes from their simple dinner sat washed and drying on the counter. Lily had spread her drawings across the coffee table, proudly showing Ethan each one while Jason tidied up the kitchen. The evening had been surprisingly pleasant, despite Jason's initial discomfort. "This one's my school," Lily explained, pointing to a colorful building with stick figures playing outside. "And this is Daddy at work." She held up another drawing showing a man with a mop. "These are wonderful, Lily," Ethan said, his eyes genuine as he studied each picture. "You have quite a talent." Jason watched from the kitchen doorway, a dish towel still in his hands. Something in Ethan's manner with Lily touched him. There was no condescension, no fake enthusiasm, just honest appreciation for a child's art. "Lily," Jason said softly, "it's getting late. Time to put the drawings away and get ready for bed." "But Dad—" Lily started to protest. "Your father's right," Ethan agreed, helping her gather the papers. "Artists need their rest too." Lily sighed but nodded, carefully stacking her drawings. "Will you come visit again?" she asked Ethan hopefully. "If your father doesn't mind," Ethan replied, glancing at Jason. Jason felt caught between his daughter's pleading eyes and his own stubborn pride. "We'll see," he managed. "That means yes," Lily whispered loudly to Ethan, making him chuckle. "Go brush your teeth, sweetheart," Jason instructed. "I'll be there in a minute to tuck you in." Once Lily had disappeared down the short hallway, Ethan rose from the couch and approached Jason. "Could we talk for a moment?" Jason tensed but nodded, leading them to the small kitchen where they could speak privately. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the worn linoleum floor. "I'll be direct," Ethan said, leaning against the counter. "I have a position available at one of my local companies, maintenance supervisor. It comes with full benefits, stable hours, and significantly better pay than what you're making now." Jason's throat tightened. "Mr. Cole," "Ethan," he corrected gently. "Ethan," Jason forced out. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't accept charity." "This isn't charity, Jason." Ethan's voice was firm but kind. "I've seen how hard you work, the way you keep this place spotless despite its age, how you put Lily first, always. Those are exactly the qualities I look for in my employees." Jason crossed his arms, fighting the hope that tried to rise in his chest. "Why are you really doing this?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "Because someone once gave me a chance when I needed it most, and because I recognize a good man who's gotten dealt a tough hand." He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it toward Jason. "This is the job listing. It's real. It's posted publicly, and you're qualified. The only special treatment here is that I'm telling you about it personally." Jason looked at the screen, his heart pounding as he read the details. The salary was more than double what he currently made. The benefits package included full medical coverage. Lily's asthma would be completely covered, Ethan added softly, knowing exactly where Jason's thoughts had gone. No more counting coins at the pharmacy. The memory of that afternoon's humiliation stung fresh. Jason pushed away from the counter, pacing the small kitchen. "There has to be a catch. The catch is you have to show up and work hard, which I already know you do." Ethan slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Sleep on it. The position needs to be filled by the end of the week, but I want you to be sure." From down the hall, Lily's voice called out, "Daddy, I'm ready. Coming, sweetheart." Jason called back, then turned to Ethan. "I should." "Of course." Ethan moved toward the front door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Jason, sometimes accepting help isn't a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest thing we can do for those who depend on us." After Ethan left, Jason went through the motions of tucking Lily in, his mind churning. She snuggled under her worn but clean blanket, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "I like Mr. Ethan," she said sleepily. "He's nice." "Yes, he is," Jason admitted, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Can he come back tomorrow?" We'll see, baby. Time for sleep now. Once Lily was asleep, Jason sat on the edge of his own bed, turning Ethan's business card over in his hands. The thick cardstock felt heavy with possibility. He thought of Lily's medical bills, the constant struggle to make ends meet, the exhaustion of working multiple jobs. The card's embossed letters caught the light as he turned it. Ethan Cole, CEO. Such a simple thing, this rectangle of paper, yet it represented a chance at a better life. If he could swallow his pride and take it. He placed the card on his nightstand, but his eyes kept returning to it as he lay in bed, torn between his fierce independence and the dream of giving Lily the life she deserved. The job wasn't charity, Ethan had said, but accepting it meant admitting he couldn't do it all alone anymore. The card sat there, silent but insistent, as Jason wrestled with the biggest decision he'd faced since becoming a single father. The first rays of dawn crept through the thin curtains of Jason's small apartment. He stood in the bathroom, hands gripping the edges of the worn sink as he studied his reflection in the cracked mirror. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from years of working multiple jobs, and worry lines creased his forehead. His work shirt, though clean, showed signs of wear at the collar. Behind him, through the open door, he could hear Lily's gentle breathing from her bedroom. The sound of her occasional wheeze made his heart clench. The memory of yesterday's dinner with Ethan, the warmth, the easy conversation, the way Lily's eyes had lit up, played in his mind. Jason pulled Ethan's business card from his pocket, the crisp white paper now slightly worn from his constant handling. He'd spent half the night turning it over and over, wrestling with his pride. The thought of accepting help from a stranger made his stomach knot, but then again, was Ethan really a stranger anymore? After last night's dinner, after seeing how genuine his concern was, what kind of father lets pride stand in the way of his daughter's well-being? He whispered to his reflection. The answer came back clear as day, not the kind of father he wanted to be. With trembling fingers, Jason pulled out his old flip phone. The numbers on the card blurred slightly as he dialed, his heart pounding with each button press. It was early, barely 6 a.m., but Ethan had said to call any time. The phone rang twice before Ethan's warm voice answered. "Good morning, Jason. I was hoping you'd call." Jason's throat tightened. "Mr. Cole, he started, then corrected himself when he remembered Ethan's insistence on first names. "Ethan, about that job offer." "Yes?" The simple word carried so much encouragement. "If it's still available, I'd like to accept." The words rushed out before his pride could stop them. "For Lily, she deserves better than." He gestured at the cramped apartment, though Ethan couldn't see it. "The position is yours," Ethan said without hesitation. "And Jason, this isn't just for Lily. You deserve better, too." The kindness in his voice made Jason's eyes sting. He blinked hard, turning away from his reflection. "When do you want me to start?" "How about today? I'll have HR ready with the paperwork when you arrive. The maintenance supervisor, Tom, is expecting you at 8. Jason glanced at the clock. 6:15 a.m. Today? Yes, I can start today. His current job at the warehouse wouldn't miss him. They hired new people every week. Excellent. Ethan's enthusiasm was contagious. "This is the beginning of something good, Jason. I know it." After getting the address and details, Jason hung up. His hands were still shaking, but now with excitement rather than nervousness. He turned on the shower, letting the temperamental water heater slowly warm up. "Daddy?" Lily's sleepy voice called from the doorway. She stood there in her favorite unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Who were you talking to?" Jason knelt down to her level, unable to contain his smile. "I was talking to Mr. Ethan. Remember him from dinner last night?" Lily's face brightened immediately. "The nice man who brought us groceries?" "That's right, sweetheart. And guess what? He offered Daddy a new job." "A better job." "Really?" Lily threw her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. "Is it because he's an angel?" Jason chuckled, the sound lighter than it had been in years. "Well, I don't know about that, but he's certainly very kind." They went through their morning routine with new energy. Jason helped Lily pick out her favorite dress, the blue one with yellow flowers that her grandmother had given her last Christmas. While she ate breakfast, he packed her lunch with food from Ethan's grocery delivery, adding a small cookie as a special treat. The morning air was crisp as they walked to school, their breaths making little clouds in front of them. Lily skipped alongside him, holding his hand and chattering about everything and nothing. The weight that had pressed on Jason's shoulders for so long felt just a little lighter. "So," he said, squeezing her small hand, "Daddy's going to start his new job today. I might be working when you get out of school, but Mrs. Johnson next door will watch you until I'm done. Is that okay?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Will you be working with Mr. Ethan?" "Not directly, but I'll be working at one of his buildings, helping to keep everything running smoothly." They stopped at the school gates, where other children were streaming in with their parents. Jason knelt to give Lily her usual goodbye hug, and she squeezed him extra tight. "See, Daddy?" she whispered in his ear, her voice full of certainty. "Angels do exist." Jason held her close, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. Maybe she was right. Maybe angels did come in unexpected forms, wearing expensive suits and carrying groceries instead of wings and halos. Jason's worn work boots crunched against the gravel as he approached the massive warehouse facility. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, and his stomach churned with nervous energy. The building loomed before him. Clean, well-maintained, with the Coal Industries logo prominently displayed above the entrance. He tugged at his collar, grateful for the second-hand shirt he'd managed to iron crisp and clean that morning. Lily had helped him pick it out, insisting the light blue brought out his eyes. The memory of her proud smile as he left for work gave him strength. Taking a deep breath, Jason pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped into the air-conditioned lobby. A friendly-faced receptionist looked up from her computer. "You must be Jason Miller," she said warmly. "I'm Sarah. Mr. Cole called ahead about you. Let me get Marcus. He's your supervisor." While she made the call, Jason stood awkwardly in the lobby, taking in the professional atmosphere. Everything seemed so much nicer than his previous workplaces. The floors gleamed, the walls wore fresh paint, and even the air smelled clean. A stocky man with salt and pepper hair strode through a side door, extending his hand. "Jason, welcome aboard. I'm Marcus Thompson, maintenance supervisor." Jason shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for having me, sir." "None of that sir business here," Marcus chuckled. "Come on, let me show you around and introduce you to the team." As they walked through the facility, Marcus explained the various operations. The warehouse served as a distribution center for medical supplies, everything from bandages to sophisticated equipment. Jason listened intently, determined to learn every detail. They entered a break room where several workers were gathering for their morning meeting. Marcus cleared his throat. "Everyone, this is Jason Miller, our newest team member. He'll be helping with maintenance and repairs." A few workers stepped forward with genuine smiles. A younger man named Dave clapped him on the shoulder. "Welcome to the madhouse," he grinned. But Jason couldn't miss the whispers from a corner of the room. Two men huddled together, shooting glances his way. "That's the one Cole brought in himself." "Yeah, heard about him. The charity case." Jason's face burned, but he kept his expression neutral. He'd expected this. It didn't make it sting any less, but he wouldn't let it show. Marcus led him to the maintenance office, walking him through his responsibilities. "We've got everything from basic repairs to more complex systems maintenance. What's your experience with industrial HVAC?" "I've done some work with heating and cooling systems," Jason replied. "But I'm willing to learn whatever's needed." "That's what I like to hear." Marcus nodded approvingly. The morning passed in a blur of introductions and training. Jason absorbed everything, asking careful questions and taking mental notes. When lunch break came, he declined Dave's friendly invitation to join the group, instead pulling out the simple sandwich he'd packed. "I've got some studying to do," he explained, holding up the maintenance manual Marcus had given him. Dave shrugged good-naturedly and left him to it. Alone in the break room, Jason devoured both his sandwich and the manual's contents. He wouldn't give anyone reason to doubt his competence or question his presence here. The afternoon brought his first real test, a conveyor belt malfunction in the sorting area. Jason approached the problem methodically, remembering similar repairs he'd done in previous jobs. He could feel eyes on him as he worked, some curious, some skeptical. The belt hummed back to life under his hands. A small victory, but it sent relief flooding through him. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, gathering his tools. "Nice work," came a voice behind him. One of the warehouse workers, Tom, he remembered, nodded appreciatively. That belt's been giving us trouble for days. Thanks, Jason replied quietly, allowing himself a small smile. He threw himself into every task that came his way, from replacing flickering lights to helping reorganize the tool room. His hands stayed busy, his mind focused. Every completed job felt like a tiny step away from being the charity case. Near the end of his shift, as Jason was double-checking his work on a faulty door seal, a familiar voice carried across the warehouse floor. "How's our newest team member doing, Marcus?" Jason turned to see Ethan Cole walking alongside Marcus, both men in casual business attire. His first instinct was to shrink away, but he forced himself to stand straight. Marcus was nodding. "He's been great. Jumped right in, fixed that troublesome conveyor belt, and he's been studying the systems in his brakes." Ethan's eyes met Jason's, and there was no pity in them, only warmth and something that looked like pride. He walked over, leaving Marcus behind. "I knew you'd be perfect for this position," Ethan said quietly, so only Jason could hear. "How are you feeling?" Jason hesitated, then answered honestly. "Like I have something to prove." "You don't," Ethan replied. "But I understand why you feel that way. Just keep doing what you're doing. Your work speaks for itself." Looking around the warehouse, at the machines he'd helped repair and the systems he was learning to maintain, Jason felt something shift inside him. It wasn't a dramatic change, but a small, warm spark of dignity reigniting. Here, his skills mattered. Here, he could earn his way. "Thank you," he said simply, meeting Ethan's eyes. "For giving me this chance. You're earning it," Ethan corrected gently. "That's what matters." He glanced at his watch. "Better head home. Isn't it about time to pick up Lily from her after-school program?" Jason nodded, touched that Ethan remembered his daughter's schedule as he gathered his things at the end of his shift. That small spark of dignity grew stronger. He might have started as the charity case, but he would prove himself through honest work and determination. For the first time in years, he felt like he was building something solid, not just for Lily, but for himself as well. Jason stared at his phone, reading Ethan's dinner invitation text for the third time. His thumb hovered over the keyboard as he considered how to respond. The thought of entering a billionaire's mansion made his palms sweat. "What's that, Daddy?" Lily peered over his arm, her brown curls tickling his skin. Her eyes widened as she read the message. "Mr. Ethan wants us to come to his house. Can we go? Please, please, please?" Jason ran a hand through his hair. "Honey, I don't know, but he's so nice, and he makes you smile more now." Lily bounced on her toes, her enthusiasm impossible to resist. "Plus, he said he has a garden with butterflies." Looking at her hopeful face, Jason felt his resistance crumbling. She'd been doing so well with her new medications, and her latest drawings showed their little family growing, now including a tall figure with a kind smile that could only be Ethan. "All right, sweetheart," he conceded, typing out a response. "We'll go." Later that evening, their old pickup truck seemed desperately out of place as they drove through the ornate gates of Ethan's estate. Lily pressed her face against the window, gasping at the perfectly manicured lawns and flowing fountains. "It's like a castle, Daddy," she exclaimed. Jason's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Sure is, Princess." Ethan waited for them at the front door, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater that probably cost more than Jason's monthly rent, but his warm smile was the same as always. "Welcome." He high-fived Lily and clasped Jason's shoulder. "I'm so glad you both came." The entrance hall took Jason's breath away. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that belonged in museums. Lily twirled in circles, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. "This way," Ethan guided them, noticing Jason's discomfort. "I thought we'd eat in the kitchen. It's more comfortable there." The kitchen, while still impressive with its professional-grade appliances, felt more intimate. Warm lighting cast a gentle glow, and delicious aromas filled the air. An elderly woman in an apron was pulling fresh bread from the oven. "This is Mrs. Henderson," Ethan introduced. "She's been taking care of me for 20 years, and still trying to teach him proper table manners." Mrs. Henderson winked at Lily, who giggled. "Would you like to help me set the table, dear?" As Lily eagerly followed Mrs. Henderson, Ethan poured Jason a glass of water. "I remember my first time in a house like this," he said quietly. "I felt like I might break something just by breathing." Jason released a nervous laugh. That obvious, huh? The thing is, Ethan continued, it's just a house. What matters is who you share it with. The tension in Jason's shoulders eased slightly as they moved to the informal dining area. The table was set simply, with mismatched plates that looked well-loved rather than expensive. Mrs. Henderson insists on using these, Ethan explained. Says they have character. The meal was comfort food, pot roast with vegetables, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Lily chatted animatedly about school, her latest art projects, and how much better her breathing had been lately. And Jenny said my drawing of the three of us was the best in class, Lily beamed. Teacher, put it on the wall. Jason noticed how Ethan's eyes softened at being included in Lily's artwork. The billionaire listened to her stories with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at her jokes. As they ate, Jason found himself relaxing. The conversation flowed easily, and even he had to admit the informal setting felt nice, natural, almost. After dinner, Ethan showed them around the ground floor. Lily marveled at the library with its floor-to-ceiling shelves, and Jason couldn't help but be impressed by the collection of first editions. They ended up in a cozy sitting room with large windows overlooking the garden. The evening light painted the sky in soft purples and oranges. Lily curled up next to Ethan on the plush sofa as he told her stories about the butterflies that visited his flowers. Her eyes grew heavy as she listened, and soon she was nestled against Ethan's side, her breathing deep and even. You feel like family, she murmured sleepily before drifting off completely. Jason watched from his armchair, a complex mix of emotions stirring in his chest. There was gratitude, certainly, and a warmth he couldn't quite name, but also an edge of uncertainty, a nagging voice, questioning if he was doing the right thing by letting someone else into their carefully constructed world. Ethan met his gaze over Lily's sleeping form, his expression gentle and understanding. Neither man spoke, letting the quiet moment stretch between them like a bridge, not quite crossed, but definitely built. The evening sun cast long shadows across Ethan's study, where antique leather chairs held both men in comfortable silence. Jason nursed a cup of coffee while Ethan gazed at a silver-framed photograph on his desk. Through the window, they could hear Lily's delighted squeals as she played in the garden with Maria, Ethan's housekeeper. She reminds me of Sarah sometimes, Ethan said softly, his fingers tracing the edge of the frame. That same spark of joy. Jason set his coffee down. Sarah? My wife. Ethan turned the frame, showing Jason a photo of a radiant woman with kind eyes and a brilliant smile. She passed away 3 years ago. Jason's throat tightened. He recognized that look of loss in Ethan's eyes. He'd seen it in his own reflection countless times. I'm sorry, he managed. Ethan nodded, his usual confidence giving way to something more vulnerable. Cancer. We fought it for 2 years, but... He trailed off, running a hand through his graying hair. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was watching her worry about me even at the end. Standing up, Ethan walked to a wall of built-in bookshelves. His fingers brushed the spines of leather-bound volumes. The night before she passed, Sarah made me promise something. His voice grew quiet. She said, "Don't let your heart grow cold, love. Keep helping the broken-hearted." Jason watched as Ethan pulled out a worn Bible, its pages marked with countless sticky notes. Sarah had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. Ethan continued. She taught Sunday school, volunteered at shelters, always found ways to help others. Even when she was sick, she'd make me drive her to visit other patients. The wealthy businessman Jason had first met at the pharmacy seemed to fade away, revealing someone much more human underneath. Ethan sat back down, the Bible resting in his lap. That day, I saw you counting coins, Ethan said, meeting Jason's eyes. I heard her voice as clear as day. Help him, she whispered. He's carrying too much alone. Jason's chest tightened with emotion. All this time, he'd assumed Ethan's help came from a place of superiority or pity. How wrong he'd been. I didn't tell you this to make you uncomfortable, Ethan added quickly. I just want you to understand, this isn't about charity or showing off. It's about honoring her memory by following God's call to help others. Through the window, Lily's laughter floated up again. Jason watched his daughter chase butterflies in the garden, her asthma forgotten in the joy of the moment. I lost my wife too, Jason found himself saying. Car accident 5 years ago. Sometimes I still reach for her side of the bed in the morning. Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. The empty spaces never really go away, do they? No, Jason agreed. But Lily, she fills so many of them. She's a remarkable child, Ethan smiled. Sarah would have adored her. They sat in companionable silence for a while. Two men united by loss and healing. The setting sun painted the study in warm amber tones. You know, Ethan said finally, Sarah used to say that grief is like a heavy backpack. We can't take it off, but we can help carry each other's weight. Jason thought about all the times he'd insisted on carrying his burden alone, too proud to accept help. How exhausting it had been, trying to be both mother and father to Lily while working himself to the bone. I've been pretty stubborn about carrying mine, he admitted. We all are at first, Ethan replied. But God didn't design us to walk alone, Jason. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone help shoulder the load. From the garden came Maria's voice, calling Lily in for her evening medication. Jason checked his watch, surprised by how late it had grown. We should probably head home, he said, standing. Ethan nodded, walking him to the door. Thank you for listening. I don't share Sarah's story often, but it felt right tonight. As they walked down the grand staircase, Lily came bounding in from the garden, her cheeks flushed with happiness. Daddy! Mr. Ethan! I caught a butterfly! Well, almost caught it. Ethan chuckled, kneeling to her level. Almost counts with butterflies, sweetheart. They're meant to be free. On the drive home, Lily chatted about her adventures in the garden while Jason's mind turned over everything Ethan had shared. The man's wealth and success hadn't come from a place of pride or power, but from a broken heart that chose to keep loving. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, Jason knelt beside his own bed. It had been months since he'd last prayed. Anger and hurt had built a wall between him and his faith. But now, in the quiet darkness, words came easily. Thank you, God, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for sending us an angel disguised as a billionaire. And thank you for Sarah, whose love keeps changing lives even now. The gravel crunched under the tires of Ethan's SUV as they wound their way through the rolling countryside. Lily pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with wonder at the endless green fields dotted with wildflowers. Jason sat in the passenger seat, watching the tension ease from his shoulders with each mile they drove away from the city. Almost there, Ethan announced, turning onto a tree-lined private road. Welcome to Pine Haven. As they crested a hill, a charming farmhouse came into view. Though spacious, it had none of the ostentation of Ethan's city mansion. Weathered wooden beams and a wraparound porch gave it a warm, lived-in feel. A red barn stood nearby, and beyond that, meadows stretched as far as the eye could see. It's like a fairy tale. Lily bounced in her seat. Look at all the flowers, Daddy. Jason had to agree. After years of cramped apartment living, the open space felt almost overwhelming. This is beautiful, Ethan. They pulled up to the house, and before the car had fully stopped, Lily was already unbuckling her seatbelt. Can I go explore, please? Hold on, sweetie, Jason said automatically, reaching for her inhaler in his pocket. Ethan noticed the gesture. The air's actually really good out here. Lots of my friends with asthma say it helps them breathe easier. As if to prove his point, Lily took a deep breath when she stepped out of the car, her face lighting up. Daddy, it smells like flowers and grass and everything. Stay where we can see you, Jason called as she took off across the nearest field, her red sneakers flashing in the sunlight. He watched her run with an ease he hadn't seen in months. No hint of the wheeze that usually accompanied such exertion. Let's get settled in, Ethan suggested, grabbing their bags from the trunk. Sarah and I used to come here whenever city life got too hectic. It's good for the soul. Inside, the house was all warm wood and comfortable furniture, with large windows that let in streams of natural light. Their rooms were upstairs, Lily's with a window seat overlooking the meadow, and Jason's next door with a small reading nook. There's fresh bread in the kitchen, Ethan said, and I thought we could grill for dinner. But first, he grinned. Want to see the barn? The old red barn turned out to be Ethan's workshop. Tools lined the walls, and several half-finished woodworking projects sat on benches. I come here to think, he explained, running his hand along a partially carved table leg. Something peaceful about working with your hands. Jason picked up a sanding block, feeling the familiar weight. I used to do carpentry before, He trailed off, remembering the years of odd jobs that followed his wife's death. "Want to help me finish this table?" Ethan asked casually, as if he hadn't noticed Jason's hesitation. They worked side by side through the afternoon, the repetitive motion of sanding wood somehow both calming and freeing. Through the barn's open doors, they could see Lily collecting wildflowers, occasionally showing her treasures to the butterflies that fluttered past. As the sun began to dip, they fired up the grill on the back porch. Lily helped arrange her flowers in mason jars while Jason and Ethan prepared dinner. The simple task of seasoning steaks and chopping vegetables felt different here, less like a chore and more like a pleasure. "I found a toad," Lily announced, running up with dirt-smudged knees and wild hair. He was really friendly, but he had to go home for dinner too. Jason couldn't remember the last time he'd heard her string so many excited sentences together without pausing for breath. Her cheeks were flushed with health, her eyes bright with adventure. They ate at the picnic table, sharing stories and laughing at Lily's dramatic retelling of her afternoon discoveries. As twilight settled over the countryside, Ethan built a fire in the stone pit near the house. The flames cast dancing shadows as they sat in Adirondack chairs, while Lily toasted marshmallows with careful concentration. The night air was cool but not cold, filled with the sound of crickets and distant frogs. "This is nice," Jason said softly, watching his daughter construct another s'more. The words felt inadequate for the peace that had settled over him, a weight he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying now lifted from his shoulders. Lily finished her treat and curled up in Jason's lap, sticky fingers clutching her stuffed rabbit. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing deep and easy. Ethan added another log to the fire, sparks rising like stars into the darkening sky. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about that day we met at the pharmacy." Jason remembered the humiliation of counting coins, the burning shame of not being able to provide for his daughter. But somehow, here in the firelight, even that memory had lost its sting. "I thank God put us together that day," Ethan continued softly, his voice barely above the crackling of the flames. Jason looked down at Lily's peaceful face, then across at Ethan's profile illuminated by the fire. He thought about all the changes in their lives since that chance encounter, not just the material improvements, but the restoration of hope, the easing of loneliness, the return of laughter. For the first time in years, he felt something unfurling in his heart, a quiet, steady hope that wouldn't be denied. Jason sat in his usual corner booth at May's Diner, sipping lukewarm coffee while waiting for his lunch break to end. The familiar smell of grilled onions and coffee grounds usually brought comfort, but today something felt off. He couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on his back. Two middle-aged women sat in the booth behind him, their voices carrying despite their attempts to whisper. "Did you hear about that Miller fellow?" one said, stirring her tea with deliberate slowness. "The one working at Coal Industries now?" Jason's hand froze mid-lift, his coffee cup hovering inches from his lips. "Oh, yes," the other woman replied, her voice dripping with judgment. "My Susan works in accounting there. Says he's living quite comfortably now, thanks to Mr. Cole's generosity." The way she said generosity made Jason's stomach turn. "Well, some people know how to work the system," the first woman said. "Find themselves a wealthy benefactor and just coast along. A kept man. That's what my Herald calls it," her friend agreed with a quiet laugh. "Though, I suppose with a child to raise alone, you do what you must." The coffee in Jason's cup rippled as his hand began to shake. Heat crept up his neck, not from anger, but from shame. He'd worked every day of his life since he was 16. He'd never asked for handouts, never expected special treatment. But their words struck deep, confirming his worst fears. Is that what everyone thought? That he was just taking advantage of Ethan's kindness? The bell above the diner door chimed as more lunch customers filtered in. Jason recognized some of them from town, the hardware store owner, a teacher from Lily's school. Their gazes slid over him with that same knowing look he'd been trying to ignore for weeks. He left money on the table and stood, his lunch barely touched. As he passed the women's booth, they suddenly became very interested in their menus, but he could feel their eyes following him out the door. That afternoon at work, Jason threw himself into his tasks with desperate energy. Every time his phone buzzed with a text from Ethan, he ignored it. When Ethan's name flashed on his screen during a call, he let it go to voicemail. By the time he picked up Lily from after-school care, his shoulders ached from tension. His daughter's usual stream of chatter about her day felt distant, like it was coming through water. "Daddy?" Lily tugged at his sleeve as they walked home. "Are you mad at Mr. Ethan?" Jason's step faltered. "What makes you say that, sweetheart?" "You look sad when his name comes up," she said, her small face scrunched with worry. "And we haven't seen him in forever." "Did you have a fight?" "No fight," Jason assured her, forcing a smile. "Sometimes grown-ups just need space. Like when I need space from Jenny at recess when she's being bossy? Something like that." But Lily wasn't satisfied. "But Mr. Ethan isn't bossy. He's nice. And he makes you smile. You used to smile a lot more when we saw him." Her words hit harder than any gossip. Jason had been so focused on what others thought, he hadn't noticed how his withdrawal was affecting Lily. That evening, after Lily was in bed, Jason sat at their small kitchen table. Bills were spread before him. Utility payments, medical costs, school expenses. He could cover them now with his new job, but just barely. The breathing room he'd started to feel these past few months was closing in again. His phone sat silent on the table, dark with ignored messages. The last one from Ethan read, "Missing my weekend buddies. Hope everything's okay." Jason picked up one of the bills, the paper crinkling in his grip. The women's words from the diner echoed in his head. Some people know how to work the system. He'd thought he was finally getting ahead, finally giving Lily the life she deserved. Instead, he'd become the subject of town gossip, a cautionary tale of a man who couldn't make it on his own. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the room. Jason sat there, shoulders hunched, the weight of shame pressing down on his chest like a physical thing. His eyes burned as he stared at the numbers on the bills, but he refused to let the tears fall. He'd survived worse than this. He'd rebuild his pride again, even if it meant going back to counting coins at the pharmacy counter. Better to struggle with dignity than live easily with shame. The evening had started normally enough. Jason was preparing a simple dinner of mac and cheese while Lily sat at their small kitchen table, coloring with her favorite crayons. The sound of her humming filled their tiny apartment with warmth. "Look, Daddy!" Lily held up her latest masterpiece, a rainbow arching over what looked like their apartment building. "It's us, and there's—" Her words cut off suddenly. Jason turned from the stove, recognizing the sharp intake of breath that wasn't quite right. Lily's eyes went wide, her small hand clutching at her chest. The crayon slipped from her fingers, rolling across the table. "Lily?" Jason rushed to her side, his heart hammering. "Baby, what's wrong?" She tried to speak, but only managed a wheezing sound. Her shoulders hunched forward as she struggled to draw air into her lungs. The familiar terror of an asthma attack gripped them both, but this one felt different. Worse. "Hold on, sweetheart." Jason ran to the bathroom cabinet, hands shaking as he grabbed her inhaler. When he returned, Lily's lips had taken on a bluish tinge that sent ice through his veins. The inhaler wasn't helping. 2 puffs, then 3, but Lily's breathing only grew more labored. Panic rose in Jason's throat as he scooped her into his arms. "We're going to the hospital, baby. Just hold on." His voice cracked as he grabbed his keys, not even bothering to turn off the stove. The drive to the emergency room was a blur of red lights and prayer. Jason kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Lily, strapped in her booster seat, her chest heaving with each attempted breath. "Stay with me, sweetie. We're almost there." They burst through the ER doors, Lily cradled against his chest. "Please, my daughter can't breathe." Nurse Alvarez, a woman Jason recognized from previous visits, rushed forward. "Bring her this way quickly." Her calm efficiency was a stark contrast to Jason's terror. They whisked Lily onto a gurney, medical terms flying over Jason's head as he tried to follow. A young administrator stepped in front of him with a clipboard. "Sir, we need to verify your insurance before—" "Please, just help her." Jason fumbled for his wallet, hands trembling so badly he could barely grip it. The administrator's voice lowered. "Sir, our records show your insurance coverage lapsed last week. We'll need to discuss payment arrangements." Jason's world tilted sideways. The insurance renewal notice. He'd been so tired, so overwhelmed with his new job and everything else. The paper had gotten buried under bills, forgotten in the chaos of daily survival. I forgot to." The words stuck in his throat. "Please, I'll pay anything. Just help my daughter." Nurse Alvarez appeared again, her face stern as she addressed the administrator. This child needs immediate treatment. Sort out the paperwork later." They allowed Jason to follow as they rushed Lily into a treatment room. The next hour was a nightmare of nebulizer treatments, oxygen masks, and monitoring equipment. Jason stood pressed against the wall, feeling helpless as medical staff worked to help his daughter breathe. Finally, Lily's breathing began to ease. The terrible blue tinge faded from her lips, replaced by healthy pink. She lay exhausted on the hospital bed, oxygen mask covering her small face, but her eyes were open and focused on Jason. "Daddy?" Her voice was barely a whisper behind the mask. Jason moved to her side, taking her tiny hand in his. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Tears burned. His eyes as guilt crashed over him in waves. How could he have forgotten something so important? What kind of father puts his child at risk like that? He stepped into the hallway for a moment, needing to collect himself. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he leaned against the wall, face in his hands. How would he pay for this? The regular bills were already stretching him thin, even with his new job. 2 nurses passed by, speaking in low voices they thought he couldn't hear. "That's the single dad, right? The one Ethan Cole's been helping?" "Yeah, poor thing. Though I'm sure Mr. Cole will bail him out again. He always does." The words hit Jason like physical blows. Is that all he was now? The charity case? The failure who couldn't even take care of his own daughter without someone else swooping in to save them? He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold linoleum floor, the weight of his failure crushing his chest. The harsh hospital lights blurred through his tears as he remembered Lily's terrified face, struggling to breathe. He'd promised to protect her, to take care of her, and he'd failed. Failed so completely that everyone just assumed someone else would have to step in and fix his mistakes. A sob caught in his throat as he stared at his worn work boots. He'd been so proud of earning his way, of finally standing on his own 2 feet. But now he was just the man who couldn't even keep his daughter's insurance current. The man who needed constant saving. From inside the room, he heard Lily's weak cough, and it pierced his heart like a knife. She deserved so much better than a father who couldn't keep her safe, who had to rely on the kindness of strangers to provide the most basic necessities. Jason pulled his knees to his chest, making himself small against the wall as more hospital staff passed by. He could feel their pitying glances, could almost hear their thoughts. Poor man. Thank goodness for Mr. Cole. What would he do without charity? The worst part was, they were right. What would he do? How could he possibly cover an emergency room visit when he couldn't even keep up with regular bills? The thought of facing Ethan, of needing his help yet again, made Jason's stomach turn. He'd worked so hard to prove he wasn't just a charity case, and now this. He pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they came anyway. In the distance, he could hear the steady beep of Lily's heart monitor, a reminder that at least she was stable, she was breathing. But each beep felt like an accusation. Failure, failure, failure. The small hospital chapel sat empty and silent, its stained glass windows casting soft colors across worn wooden pews. Jason stumbled through the doorway, his legs barely holding him up after hours of pacing outside Lily's room. His hands shook as he collapsed onto the front pew, the weight of everything finally crushing him. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking, "please don't take her. She's all I have left." The words echoed in the quiet space as tears began rolling down his cheeks. His shoulders hunched forward as if trying to shield himself from an invisible blow. The chapel's dim lighting felt both comforting and accusatory. Jason stared at the simple wooden cross on the wall, remembering all the times he'd pushed away help, all the moments his pride had stood in the way. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. I should have done better. Should have been better." His hands gripped the back of the pew in front of him until his knuckles turned white. "I know I don't deserve your help. I've been stubborn and proud, but please, please don't let my daughter pay for my mistakes." His voice cracked on the last word, and a sob escaped his throat. The sound of quiet footsteps behind him made Jason stiffen, but he couldn't bring himself to turn around. He knew those steps, had heard them so many times over the past weeks, always bringing kindness he felt he didn't deserve. Ethan slid quietly into the pew beside him, not speaking, just being present. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. Signs he'd rushed straight from work when he'd heard about Lily. The two men sat in silence for several long moments, their breathing the only sound in the sacred space. "I failed her," Jason finally whispered, his voice raw. "I got so caught up in what people were saying, in my own stupid pride, that He couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of his perceived failures pressed down on him like a physical force. "The doctors say she's stabilizing," Ethan said softly. "She's fighting, Jason, just like her father." Jason shook his head, fresh tears spilling. "I'm not strong. A strong father wouldn't have let this happen. A strong father would have." His words dissolved into quiet sobs. Ethan turned slightly in the pew, his face gentle in the colored light filtering through the windows. "Strength isn't in carrying everything alone," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's letting someone carry you when you can't." The simple truth in those words broke something in Jason's chest. Years of built-up walls, of fierce independence born from loss and fear, began to crumble. His shoulders shook as he tried to hold back the flood of emotions. "I keep trying to do it all myself," Jason admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Keep thinking if I just work harder, if I just push through." He wiped roughly at his eyes. "But I'm so tired, Ethan. I'm so tired of being afraid all the time." "I know," Ethan replied softly. "I've been there too. After Sarah died, I thought being strong meant never letting anyone see how broken I was." He paused, his own eyes growing distant with memory. "But true strength, it's having the courage to let others in, to accept help when you need it." Jason's breath hitched as another sob worked its way free. "I don't know how," he confessed. "I've been alone so long. I don't know how to not be alone anymore." "You're not alone," Ethan said firmly. "You haven't been since that day in the pharmacy. I'm here, Jason. I'm not going anywhere." The sincerity in Ethan's voice, the steady presence beside him, finally broke the last of Jason's resistance. His carefully maintained control shattered, and he wept openly, years of pent-up fear and loneliness pouring out. Without hesitation, Ethan's arm came around his shoulders, offering the support Jason had denied himself for so long. "Let it out," Ethan murmured. "You don't have to be strong right now. Just let it out." And there in the quiet chapel, surrounded by colored light and the peace of sacred space, Jason finally allowed himself to lean on someone else's strength. His tears fell freely as Ethan held him steady, years of solitary struggle washing away in waves of release and relief. Through his tears, Jason felt something shift inside him, as if a heavy burden he'd carried for years was finally being shared. For the first time since losing his wife, he didn't feel completely alone. The chapel's silence held them both as Jason's weeping gradually softened, Ethan's quiet presence anchoring him in this moment of vulnerability and change. Jason's tears fell silently in the dim chapel light. His shoulders shook as years of pent-up pride and pain finally broke free. Ethan's steady presence beside him felt like an anchor in a storm. Through the chapel's open door, they heard the urgent bustle of medical staff. A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand, her face pinched with concern. "Mr. Miller, we need to discuss payment arrangements before—" "I'll handle everything." Ethan stood, his voice quiet but firm. He pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway, speaking in low tones with hospital administration. Jason buried his face in his hands. "I can't let you—" "Yes, you can," Ethan returned, sitting back down. His blue eyes held a mixture of compassion and determination. "Do you know what Sarah told me before she died?" He didn't wait for Jason's response. "She made me promise to use our wealth to heal broken hearts, not just write checks, but to truly care, to love people." The chapel's silence wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Outside, a code blue alarm blared, then faded. "But the whole town," Jason's voice cracked. "They think I'm taking advantage of you." Ethan's laugh was gentle. "Since when do we let gossip decide what's right? Jason, look at me." Jason raised his head slowly, meeting Ethan's gaze. "You and Lily aren't a burden. You're a blessing." Ethan's words carried the weight of absolute conviction. "These past months, watching Lily laugh, seeing you stand taller each day, it's given me purpose again. After Sarah died, I was just going through the motions. Your family brought life back into my world." A doctor appeared in the doorway, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. Mr. Miller, we've started the treatment. Your daughter's responding well. Jason started to rise, but his legs trembled. Ethan's hand gripped his elbow, steadying him. The insurance situation? The doctor asked hesitantly. Handled, Ethan replied simply. Please ensure she receives everything she needs. They walked together to Lily's room. The sight of her small form in the hospital bed, breathing mask over her face, made Jason's heart clench. But her color was better, and the monitors showed strong vital signs. Daddy? Lily's voice was muffled behind the mask, but her eyes brightened when she saw them both. I'm here, sweetheart. Jason rushed to her side, taking her tiny hand in his. How are you feeling? Better. She looked past him to Ethan. You came too. Of course I did. Ethan moved to her other side, smoothing her tangled hair. Can't let my favorite artist miss her drawing time, can I? Lily's smile was visible even behind the mask. Will you stay? As long as you need me, Ethan promised. Jason felt something shift inside him, like a wall crumbling. He watched Ethan pull up a chair, noticed how naturally he fit into their little family circle. The man's wealth and status meant nothing here. It was his heart that mattered. A nurse entered to check Lily's vitals, nodding approvingly. She's stabilizing nicely. The new medication is doing its job. Thank God, Jason whispered. And he meant it literally. He bowed his head, still holding Lily's hand, and offered a quiet prayer of gratitude for his daughter's life, for Ethan's friendship, for the grace to finally accept help without shame. Lily's breathing deepened as she drifted into peaceful sleep. The room grew quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Jason watched her chest rise and fall, each breath a precious gift. Ethan, he said softly. Thank you. Not just for this, but for everything. For not giving up on us when I pushed you away. Ethan's smile was gentle. That's what family does, Jason. We stick together through the hard times. Family. The word echoed in Jason's heart as he sat in the dim hospital room, his daughter's hand in his, watching her heal. Sometimes blessings came in unexpected packages. Sometimes angels wore business suits and had checking accounts. And sometimes, the greatest act of strength was learning to accept love when it was freely offered. The morning sunlight filtered through the hospital room's thin curtains, casting a gentle glow across Lily's small form. Her eyes fluttered open, and despite the IV in her arm and the monitors beeping steadily beside her, she managed a weak but radiant smile that lit up her entire face. Daddy? She whispered, her voice scratchy but clear. Jason leaned forward from his chair, taking her tiny hand in his. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from the sleepless night, and his work shirt was wrinkled from sitting vigil at her bedside. I'm here, sweetheart. Right here. Ethan stood quietly by the window, his usual polished appearance somewhat rumpled after spending the night at the hospital. He watched the father and daughter with gentle eyes, giving them space while remaining close enough to offer support. I'm sorry, Lily. Jason's voice cracked as he spoke, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough. I should have taken better care of you. Should have made sure the insurance was... Don't cry, Daddy, Lily interrupted, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had. Her eyes, though tired, held that pure wisdom that only children seem to possess. You're the best daddy because you never gave up. Jason's breath caught in his throat. He bowed his head, pressing his forehead against their joined hands. The simple truth in her words cut through his defenses like nothing else could. Ethan moved closer, placing a gentle hand on Jason's shoulder. She's right, you know, he said softly. You've never given up, not once. That's real strength. The morning nurse bustled in, checking Lily's vitals with practiced efficiency. Looking much better today, she announced cheerfully, adjusting Lily's pillows. The medication is working exactly as it should. Jason watched as the nurse worked, his mind spinning with thoughts of medical bills and future treatments. As if reading his thoughts, Ethan stepped forward. Everything's taken care of, he assured quietly. All you need to focus on is Lily getting better. But I can't just... Jason started to protest. Remember what we talked about in the chapel? Ethan's voice was firm but kind. This isn't about pride anymore, Jason. This is about love. Lily's small voice piped up from the bed. Like in my drawing at school? The one with both my daddies? A flush crept up Jason's neck, but this time it wasn't from shame. He looked at his daughter's innocent face, then at Ethan's steadfast presence, and felt something shift inside his chest. The wall of pride he'd built up over years of struggling alone began to crumble. "Yeah, sweetheart," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Something like that." The nurse finished her checks and left them alone again. Lily's eyes were growing heavy, the medication making her drowsy. "Can you tell me a story?" she asked, fighting to keep her eyes open. "Of course," Jason said, pulling his chair closer. But before he could begin, Lily turned her head toward Ethan. "Both of you?" she requested hopefully. Ethan pulled up another chair on the opposite side of the bed. "I'd be honored," he said, sharing a warm look with Jason over Lily's head. As they took turns weaving a simple tale about a brave little girl and her adventures, Jason watched his daughter's face relax into peaceful sleep. The sight of her chest rising and falling steadily was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. In the quiet that followed, Jason made a silent, solemn promise to himself. Never again would he let his pride stand in the way of his daughter's health and happiness. Never again would he choose the burden of solitude over the blessing of help freely given. Ethan seemed to sense the weight of Jason's thoughts. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "Careful not to wake Lily. You never have to be alone again." Jason nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He kept his hand wrapped around Lily's smaller one, watching her sleep peacefully. The morning sun continued to brighten the room, chasing away the shadows of the long night. Much like Ethan's presence had begun to chase away the shadows in their lives. The steady beeping of the heart monitor created a soothing rhythm, a reminder that his daughter was safe, protected not just by his love now, but by a circle of care that had expanded to include someone he'd once viewed with suspicion. His daughter's innocent trust had seen what his pride had initially refused to acknowledge, that sometimes angels came disguised as strangers in pharmacies, bearing not just help, but the gift of genuine love. In the peaceful morning light, watching his daughter sleep while Ethan kept quiet vigil with him, Jason felt the last of his resistance melt away. The shame of needing help, the fear of depending on others, the pride that had nearly cost him everything, all of it seemed to dissolve in the face of this simple truth. Love was stronger than pride, and accepting help wasn't weakness but wisdom. The afternoon sun warmed their faces as Jason, Ethan, and Lily climbed the creaky stairs to their third-floor apartment. Lily clutched her favorite stuffed bear, a gift from Ethan during her hospital stay, while Jason carried her small overnight bag. Even though she was cleared to walk, Ethan insisted on holding her other hand, carefully matching her slower pace. "Almost there, sweetheart," Jason said, fishing his keys from his pocket. The familiar jingle made their apartment feel more real, more like home after the sterile hospital environment. The door squeaked open, revealing their modest living space. Jason felt a twinge of self-consciousness, the worn couch, the scratched coffee table, the faded curtains, but it faded when he saw Lily's face light up. "My drawings!" she exclaimed, pointing to her artwork covering the refrigerator. "Can I show Mr. Ethan my new ones?" "Of course you can, honey. But first, let's get you settled on the couch." Jason arranged the pillows while Ethan helped Lily get comfortable. The apartment, though small, had been cleaned and stocked. Jason knew Ethan had arranged it all fresh groceries in the fridge, Lily's prescriptions organized on the counter, even a new blanket draped over the couch. The gesture touched him deeply. "I can't thank you enough," Jason said quietly to Ethan, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for the hospital bills, but for everything." Ethan shook his head, his kind eyes meeting Jason's. "You don't need to keep thanking me. You're not alone anymore, Jason. I hope you understand that now." Lily was already pulling out her sketchbook, her energy returning bit by bit. "Daddy, can we have dinner together? All of us?" "We should let you and your dad rest," Ethan started, but Jason interrupted. "Please stay," he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "It's not much, but I can make spaghetti. It's Lily's favorite." "Mine too," Ethan smiled, taking off his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. "Let me help." They moved around the small kitchen together, Jason boiling pasta while Ethan stirred the sauce. Lily sat at the counter, drawing contentedly and occasionally offering commentary on their cooking technique. "You're stirring it wrong, Mr. Ethan," she giggled. "Daddy says you have to do it with love." "Oh, really?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, making an exaggerated stirring motion. "Is this better?" Their laughter filled the apartment, and Jason felt something shift inside him. The shame that had weighed him down for so long was dissolving, replaced by a warmth he hadn't felt since before his wife passed. The kitchen timer dinged, and soon they were sitting around the small table. Steam rose from their plates, and the garlic bread Ethan's contribution filled the air with its homey aroma. Lily insisted on saying grace, her small voice earnest as she thanked God for making them all a family. Jason watched as Ethan helped Lily twirl her spaghetti, showing her the trick with the spoon that Jason's wife used to do. The billionaires sat in their mismatched chairs, ate from their chipped plates, and looked completely at home. "This is delicious," Ethan said, reaching for seconds. "Better than any restaurant." "Daddy makes the best spaghetti," Lily declared proudly. "Even when we only had a little bit, he always made it special." Jason felt his throat tighten at the memory of those lean times, stretching a single box of pasta across several meals. But now, watching Lily chat animatedly with Ethan about her plans to draw a picture of their dinner, those difficult days felt more distant. The simple meal stretched on, none of them rushing to leave the table. They talked about everything and nothing: Lily's upcoming return to school, Jason's work at the warehouse, Ethan's childhood dreams of being a chef. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by Lily's infectious giggles and Ethan's warm chuckles. Looking around the table, Jason realized something profound. This wasn't just three people sharing a meal, it was family. Not by blood, but by something deeper, by choice, by love. The kind of love that showed up at pharmacies with a credit card, that sat in hospital chapels at midnight, that stirred spaghetti sauce the right way just to make a little girl laugh. His humble apartment, which had often felt like a reminder of his struggles, now felt like the richest place in the world. The scratch table held more than just plates of spaghetti. It held healing, hope, and the promise of tomorrow. As Lily launched into another story about her hospital adventures, primarily featuring the kind nurse who snuck her extra pudding cups, Jason caught Ethan's eye. No words were needed. The gentle nod they shared said everything. This was home. This was family. This was enough. The morning sunlight streamed through the apartment's small kitchen window as Jason prepared Lily's breakfast. 1 week had passed since they'd returned from the hospital, and life was slowly finding its rhythm again. The toaster popped, and he smiled at the sound of Lily humming in her room, a melody he hadn't heard in far too long. A gentle knock at the door announced Ethan's arrival. He'd been stopping by every morning to check on them, always bringing fresh fruit or something special for Lily. Today, he carried a paper bag that smelled of warm cinnamon rolls. "Good morning," Ethan said, his voice warm as he stepped inside. "I thought we could all have breakfast together." Lily bounded out of her room, her dark curls bouncing. "Mr. Ethan, did you bring the rolls from Mrs. Baker's shop?" "Your favorite," Ethan confirmed, setting the bag on the counter. He caught Jason's eye. "And I was hoping to talk with your dad about something important." Jason nodded, pouring coffee into 3 mugs milk for Lily. They settled around the small kitchen table, where sunlight caught the edge of Lily's latest crayon masterpiece taped to the wall. "Jason," Ethan began, his tone gentle but serious. "I've been thinking about your position at the company." He paused, stirring his coffee. "I'd like to offer you something permanent: full benefits, flexible hours for Lily's appointments, and a salary that would let you breathe easier." Jason's hand tightened around his mug. A month ago, pride would have made him refuse immediately. But now, watching Lily happily bite into her cinnamon roll, he saw things differently. "The maintenance supervisor position is opening up," Ethan continued. "You've more than proved yourself these past weeks. The team respects you, Jason. This isn't charity. It's recognition of your hard work." Lily looked up from her breakfast, face sprinkled with cinnamon sugar. "Does this mean Daddy can stay at your company forever?" Jason felt tears prick at his eyes, but they weren't tears of shame. He remembered his prayer in the hospital chapel, remembered how God had sent help in his darkest moment. This wasn't about pride anymore, it was about provision. "I'd be honored," Jason said softly, meeting Ethan's gaze. "Thank you." Ethan's smile was bright, with genuine joy. Welcome aboard, officially. Over the next few weeks, the change in Jason became visible to everyone in town. He walked taller, smiled more easily, and spoke with quiet confidence. The whispers in the grocery store changed from pitying to admiring. Even Mrs. Thompson, who'd been the first to spread gossip about Jason taking advantage, stopped him after church to apologize. "You look well, Jason," she said, genuine warmth in her voice. "It does my heart good to see you and little Lily thriving." The warehouse workers who'd once called him the charity case now sought his advice and leadership. Jason ran his team with the same careful attention he gave to raising Lily firm but kind, always ready to help someone struggling. One Thursday afternoon, Lily's school hosted their spring art show. Jason left work early, meeting Ethan in the school parking lot. They walked in together, both wearing proud smiles as they followed the paper signs to the gymnasium. "Daddy, Mr. Ethan!" Lily waved frantically from her display, practically bouncing with excitement. "Come see my drawing." The gym was filled with parents admiring artwork, but Jason's focus was entirely on his daughter. She wore her favorite blue dress, the one Ethan had given her for her birthday, and her eyes sparkled with joy. "I saved the best for last," she declared, leading them to her piece. "Close your eyes," both men obliged, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Okay, open them." There, mounted on bright yellow construction paper, was a crayon drawing titled in careful letters, "My Two Daddies." The picture showed three figures, Jason, Ethan, and Lily, holding hands in front of a house with a big red heart above it. The details were pure Lily. Jason wore his work uniform with a tool belt. Ethan had on his fancy suit, as she called it, and she stood between them wearing a crown of stars. "See?" Lily pointed proudly. "That's us! Our family!" Jason felt his throat tighten with emotion. He glanced at Ethan, who looked equally moved, his eyes suspiciously bright. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Jason managed, kneeling to hug her. Other parents gathered around, admiring Lily's work. Mrs. Parker, Lily's art teacher, approached with a bright smile. "Lily told us all about her special family," she said warmly. "How God sent her an angel in the pharmacy that day." She touched Jason's arm. "Sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?" Jason nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He felt Ethan's steady presence beside him, saw Lily's radiant smile, and knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where they were meant to be. "My dad says you can never have too many people to love you," Lily announced to her growing audience, beaming between Jason and Ethan. "And now I have two daddies to love me double." The adults laughed softly, touched by her innocent wisdom. Jason caught Ethan's eye, seeing his own gratitude reflected there. This wasn't the family either of them had expected, but God had known exactly what they all needed. The community center buzzed with warmth and laughter as families gathered for the annual spring potluck. Colorful paper streamers hung from the ceiling, and the smell of home-cooked dishes filled the air. Through the large windows, the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the room, making everything seem just a bit more magical. Jason stood near the dessert table, watching Lily show her latest drawings to Mrs. Thompson, her art teacher. His daughter's dark curls bounced as she explained each detail with enthusiasm. She wore the new yellow dress they'd bought last weekend, something that would have been impossible just months ago when he'd been counting coins at the pharmacy counter. Ethan appeared beside him, carrying 2 plates of food. "She's really coming out of her shell," he said, nodding toward Lily. "The art program's been wonderful for her." "Thanks to you," Jason replied, no longer feeling the sting of pride that would have once accompanied those words. "I never thought I'd see her this happy and healthy." The room was filled with familiar faces, people who had once whispered about Jason being Ethan's charity case. Now they smiled warmly, having witnessed the genuine friendship that had grown between the two men. Some even stopped to chat about the warehouse's latest expansion project, where Jason had recently been promoted to maintenance supervisor. Lily spotted them and came running over, her artwork clutched in one hand. "Daddy! Uncle Ethan! Look what I made!" She held up a vibrant drawing of 3 figures holding hands under a rainbow. The details were impressive for a 7-year-old Jason's work uniform, carefully colored in blue, Ethan's signature red tie, and her yellow dress perfectly matched the one she wore. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Jason said, kneeling down to get a better look. "Is this for the art show next month?" "Uh-huh," Lily beamed. "Mrs. Thompson says I can put it right in the front." She reached out, taking both men's hands in hers. "Can we go get some cake now, please?" Jason exchanged an amused look with Ethan. "Well, since you asked so nicely." As they walked together toward the dessert table, Lily swinging their hands, Jason felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. Just months ago, he'd been drowning in worry and shame, trying to scrape together enough money for his daughter's medicine. Now, Lily's asthma was well managed. They had proper health insurance. And more importantly, they had family not by blood, but by something deeper. Several people smiled at their little trio, including Pastor Mike, who had been a steady source of encouragement since Jason started attending church with Ethan. The pastor had helped Jason understand that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was part of being in a community, part of having faith. "Look at all the desserts," Lily exclaimed, standing on tiptoe to peer at the array of cakes, pies, and cookies spread across the table. "Remember, just one piece," Jason reminded her, though he couldn't help grinning at her excitement. A year ago, treats like these had been rare luxuries. Now, while they still lived modestly, they no longer had to count every penny or worry about tomorrow's meals. Ethan helped Lily select a slice of chocolate cake, carefully placing it on her plate. "Would you like to sit by the window?" he asked. "We can watch the sunset while we eat." They found a quiet corner with a perfect view of the western sky, which was beginning to paint itself in brilliant oranges and pinks. Lily sat between them, happily diving into her cake while chattering about her upcoming art show. Jason watched his daughter, remembering those dark nights when he'd lain awake, wondering how he could possibly give her the life she deserved. Now, instead of counting coins, he counted blessings. Lily's improved health, their stable home, his dignified work, their church family, and Ethan's unwavering friendship. The sunset deepened, casting long shadows across the community center's floor. Lily leaned against Jason's arm, growing sleepy despite the sugar. Around them, families were beginning to gather their empty dishes and say their goodbyes. "Daddy," Lily murmured, "can we say our thank you prayer?" It was their nightly ritual now, one that had started during her hospital stay. Jason nodded, closing his eyes as Lily took both his and Ethan's hands again. The simple gesture brought tears to his eyes, how far they'd come from that desperate day at the pharmacy. The setting sun wrapped them in its warm glow as Jason bowed his head. In the quiet moment, surrounded by the love of his daughter and the friendship of a man who had become like a brother, he whispered his own prayer of gratitude. For the first time in years, he felt completely at peace, knowing that he and Lily had found not just financial security, but something far more precious: faith, love, and a future overflowing with hope. Lily squeezed his hand, and Jason opened his eyes to find her smiling up at him. The last rays of sunlight caught the tears on his cheeks, but he wasn't ashamed of them anymore. They were tears of joy, of gratitude, of a father who had learned that true strength sometimes meant letting others help carry the load. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jason Miller, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.